Hello, we are on session 17 and it's 2 a.m. in the morning in France. So we are going to navigate from Japan to Taiwan, talking about coral reefs, seaweeds, opportunities, and the future of the coast. In this session, we will explore how coral reef ecosystems, but also seaweed resources are studied, protected, but also developed across East and South East Asia. So we're talking here about research, but also life experience from people who are living or have lived in the region.
The key topics include the ecology and resilience of coral reefs in warming subtropical waters, especially around Taiwan.
We need resilience, the emerging potential of seaweed farming and harvesting as a sustainable solution for climate mitigation, food systems, and coastal economies.
Personal and professional reflection from the field, emphasizing how cultural context and ocean experience shape research and stewardship.
So here we go for this panel. We're lucky to have some research part, Aziz Moula and Crystal Macrae. Aziz, I think a few of you know him now, is a postdoc at University Professor in the lab Economies, and he has worked earlier in Taiwan. Crystal Macrae is joining us. She's an assistant professor at the National Sun Yat-sen University in Taiwan. And Antoine Herves and William Brennan will be talking about seaweed. Antoine Herves, so Blue Economy Consultant at Biomarine, developed an experience on seaweed in China. And William Brennan is developing this experience right now as a MarWorld student in Blue Manager. Mm-hmm. Hello, everyone. We're going to start, Crystal, with you about your experience and what you're currently studying in Taiwan.
Great. Awesome. Thanks very much for the invite here. And also thank you to all of you guys who are still going strong at 2 a.m. your time. It's 8 a.m. here in Taiwan, so I feel really spoiled. So thank you to all of you. And it's been really enjoyable to watch the session so far. So yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a marine ecologist. I'm originally from Canada, but I've been here in Taiwan for about 17 years now. I'm based at National Sun Yat-sen University in southern Taiwan, and my research here focuses on climate change and marine ecosystems. Specifically, I'm really interested in coral reef ecosystems and trying to understand how the foundational organisms, the corals, are faring under climate change. So everyone kind of knows the two kind of big drivers for coral are ocean acidification, climate change drivers, impacts are ocean acidification and temperature. My work focuses predominantly on temperature. So you can kind of group my research into two main categories, basically the stuff we do in the lab and the stuff we do in the field. In the lab, we collect corals, we bring them to the lab, and we stress them with high temperature. And we're not really trying to be mean to them. We're just trying to figure out, at what limit do they start feeling really stressed out? So trying to identify those upper limits to their tolerance, and also looking at how they can recover after they're exposed to that really high temperature, because that's really important too. We want to know when they get stressed out, and after they're stressed, like after a marine heat wave, can they actually recover and maintain their function and ecosystem services? On the flip side of that, in the lab, we also think about, once we know that upper limit, is there anything we as scientists can do to kind of boost or enhance that limit? And we're trying something called transgenerational acclimation, which is basically just a fancy way to say, if we heat up the adult colonies, does it make their offspring stronger? Preliminary results don't really show a lot of strong evidence for that, but we're still exploring, and other people globally are finding that selective breeding or changing the algae that live inside the coral can be really successful. So there's still hope there. Just in our lab, we're not finding a lot of evidence for that boost in thermal tolerance. We don't spend all our time in the lab, though, thankfully. I think most of us, when we get into marine ecology, it's because we like being in the ocean. So we do a lot of diving as well. And kind of that has two main parts, too. So we dive to see if what we observe in the lab matches up to what we see in the field, because that's super important, right? If we're doing all of these experiments in the lab, we want to make sure they're realistic representations of how the coral actually respond. So we kind of do these paired experiments where we run a heat stress experiment, and then we go diving during the peak of the heat wave in the summer to see if the responses match up. And kind of the last big broad thing we're doing is we're developing long-term monitoring plots. So kind of like what you'd see in the terrestrial environment, we have so many different long-term monitoring sites, but in the ocean, we kind of lag behind a little. So we're using photogrammetry to establish long-term monitoring plots. So we go out, we dive, we take thousands of pictures, and we use software to stitch all that together, and it builds a really cool 3D model of the reef. And from that, we can understand the coral health, their growth, how the reef is changing under climate change. So lots of cool stuff. Yeah, so broadly, we look at how coral respond to climate change impacts, and we're seeking out information and as well as a little bit of hope. Yeah, so that's my lab and what we do.
Thank you, Crystal. So we can go to Aziz. Aziz, you used to work in Taiwan, so maybe you were working on roughly the same topic?
Yes, similar topics on reef resilience, reef recovery for sure. A little bit different. I wasn't so focused on so much on climate change, but I was kind of working on the opposite side of the island to Crystal, on two other islands outside of Taiwan, on primarily how reefs recover from disturbance events such as typhoons, and a little bit of bleaching towards the end before I left Taiwan. Yeah.
So not temperature.
Not temperature, no. Just direct effects of disturbance. And maybe I can share my screen.
Of course, go ahead. We need to know more.
Yes. I knew Crystal would talk about the kind of nitty-gritty stuff, so thought I could kind of introduce Taiwan a little bit, because it's a pretty amazing place. A place where you can have lush green forests, tropical forests, 3,000-meter mountains that slide straight down into coral reef. So it's a pretty amazing place if you get the chance to visit. It's actually not big at all. If it was compared to European countries, it would be the size of Belgium or the Netherlands. So it's relatively small. But despite that, it hosts an incredible amount of biodiversity. So 2,500 species of marine fish, more than 300 species of coral, 600 species of marine algae. So it's a real kind of biodiversity hotspot, and it's been described as the Asian Galapagos as well. My research primarily focuses on disturbance. So I am interested in two very simple questions of how this happened and kind of why this happened as well. So how do we go from environment on the left to environment on the right? It takes time, not as much as you think, but I'm interested in also the consequences of this recovery, of this environment that we have at the end. This is caused by typhoons, and it's really important to mention this about Taiwan, that it's in the path of multiple typhoons over the summer months. And because of this, the people have become resilient, and also the corals have become extremely resilient as well. And we're able to see these incredible recoveries into these amazing reefs that are able to persist across time, and also these really, really huge disturbances. So my research focuses on recovery mechanisms. So we track populations, different populations throughout the south part of the island, and we're able to see how and why things happen along the reef by tracking individuals over time. And this is real crucial information that does take a long time, and does take a lot of effort, as Crystal mentioned, a lot of diving, but it is really worthwhile in the end to do so. Future research. So even though I'm not primarily a coral reef ecologist anymore, I'm more into seaweeds now. I still am doing a bit of research on corals as well. So this is future research on the consequences of recovery, and something which we don't really focus on that much, about what how the reef has changed over time and the consequences of this change. And obviously something Crystal mentioned was the effect of climate change. Climate change has huge effects in Taiwan. Anyone living in Taiwan will tell you the temperature is sometimes unbearable on land, never mind in the ocean. And in 2020, we had a huge mass bleaching event, and we still really don't understand the consequences of this mass bleaching event. So there is lots to do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. Thank you, Crystal. So before we go to the seaweed part, maybe Aziz and Crystal. So Crystal, you're working on the effect of temperature. Can we come back on the idea of the range of temperature you're testing? And so is temperature expected in this place in a near future, for example?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of heat waves coming in through Taiwan every year. We're starting to see bleaching events every summer now. So generally around 30 degrees, we start to see some stress and bleaching in corals. In some places in Taiwan, we have these really dynamic, interesting places. We have one place where it's been influenced by nuclear power plant warming for 3 or 4 decades. So corals there are pretty unique in their response to the high temperature. So they can take up to 31, 32, but once we get above that, then we're looking at, mass bleaching across the reef. And as Aziz mentioned, in 2020, we had this huge mass bleaching event. Last summer was really bad too. And unfortunately, this summer, we're kind of tracking the same temperatures as last summer. So in the field, yeah, anything above 30 gets really stressful. In the lab, we take them up a lot higher than that. But that's just really trying to push them to the limits.
So it's really a threshold.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's really a threshold. So a threshold which is crossed more and more regularly as the trend is going up.
Yeah, for sure. But that threshold varies a lot based on the species and based on the region. So that's something I'm really interested in and trying to figure out, where are those really strong ones and why are they strong? Is it because of the animal itself or because of some of the symbionts in the coral? So a lot of cool questions to ask.
Yeah, we heard about similar questions with Tara Ocean, and whether they were in the Pacific studying the different types of the same species in different regions with different temperatures. Aziz, so you worked with resilience of corals. How long does it take, maybe I missed that, how long does it take for corals communities to come back to a natural state after a disaster like a hurricane?
So like Crystal mentioned, it is species specific. So the coral reef that we tracked, it was hit by a huge typhoon in 2009, and we started monitoring it in 2012. And within 4 years after that, it had recovered to a certain extent. The problem is the recovery looks amazing, but it was primarily driven by 1 or 2 different species. And so what we end up with is a pretty homogeneous reef. So a lot of people will go diving along this reef and think the recovery is fantastic, but actually it's not the diverse reef that we would expect or we would want from the reefs in Taiwan. So this disturbance will have a huge effect, not only initially, but also years and years afterwards. What's interesting, though, is that the reef can recover in this way very, very fast. So within 4 years is pretty fast, and it can start to reproduce after that amount of time. So it shows that the reefs in Taiwan do have a high resilience, do have a high capacity to get back to a certain state.
And have you seen a kind of a pattern of resilience capacity according to stressors, like external stressors?
One thing which is worrying is that these reefs have undergone disturbance in the form of typhoons for a long time, and they've been able to persist. What is worrying is the effect of climate change and bleaching, and Crystal's research is trying to answer this quite right.
Because so your both works combined a lot here.
Yeah, we do work together in a project, but I think are quite complementary for sure, and we come at it from quite different sides, but all working towards the same goal. Yeah.
Just to build on that really quick, I'll just do a little promo here. So Aziz and I, we are working together on a project, and that project is looking at a review of all the coral research that's been done in Taiwan. So for anyone interested who's listening today, stay tuned. Hopefully in a little while, there will be some nice document that you can go to and find out everything you want to know about coral reefs in Taiwan. Because I think when people think about Taiwan, it's not the first thing that pops to their mind. Maybe they think of bubble tea or stinky tofu or Jeremy Lin. That coral reefs is not the first thing that people think about, but it's Taiwan's incredible for coral reefs. We have such a diversity of different reef ecosystems, and yeah, you can read all about it soon, I hope.
And you can get to the reef. You can wake up at 7 and you can be diving by 10 and take a flight within that time. So it's a fantastic place to dive. And hopefully, yes, this will be out soon.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Aziz. Now
you.
we're going into seaweed with you, Antoine and William. We start with Antoine.
Yeah.
Okay, Antoine. So can you come back on your experience about seaweed in the origin? We're not going to comment what's happening around you.
Yeah. No, so for me, I have more of an experience in China, more specifically, although I've been working in the seaweed space for around 6.5 years. What's interesting with Asia is that it's really the birthplace of the seaweed industry. They've had experience for more than 200, 300 years, in some cases even more. Aquaculture represents more than 90% of seaweed production on a global scale, so it really represents a huge amount of the industry. But what's interesting is despite the large size today, the industry in Asia is really reinventing itself. Their overproduction for over 50 years, using intensive fertilizers,
50
very
years,
intensive
50.
aquaculture. Sorry?
50 years.
Yes, at least, but it's been more. I mean, aquaculture has been pretty intense. Sorry about that. But yes, aquaculture has been pretty intense, and today they're actually starting to see the negative effects of intensive aquaculture. So there's eutrophication, there's a huge loss of biodiversity. So today, what's very interesting, especially in China, is that they're looking at using outside innovation, so coming from the United States, coming from Europe, to see how they could solve a lot of ecological challenges that they're facing today, and say how can they combine industrial aquaculture at the same time as using ecological preservation of the ecosystems. So it's a huge biological shift for them. But what's interesting is that China has the capacity to do so. Unlike a lot of countries around the world, they have a capacity to rapidly shift and put the infrastructure and the financial needs to actually address these issues relatively fast. And we have examples such as in the Southeast regions or around Shanghai, where they're starting to re-implement strategies, implementing mangrove restoration, adding seaweed aquaculture around it, to have a whole ecosystem approach rather than having fully intensive monoculture of seaweed. So it's very interesting on that end. Just to do a quick jump on Taiwan, because I'm speaking too much, I think.
No, you take
What's
your time.
interesting about what's interesting about Taiwan is that from a seaweed perspective and as an ocean part as a whole, they're also very interested in traditional ecological knowledge. So they're also looking really into the community knowledge of very traditional communities and seeing how that could be used to rethink modern aquaculture, rethink the relationship we have to the ocean. So China is not there. They're still very in the technical phases, but I think this traditional side as well can help us learn a lot of lessons on how we can manage better the oceans and how we manage the resources.
Thank you, Antoine. So we're coming back to you with some questions. Jumping to you, William. So William, you're currently a Blue Manager student, and you're discovering a bit all of these opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I guess I want to start off just for a second with, I guess, kind of my connection to our overall topic today was just further up the Kuroshio Current in Okinawa is where I had some of my formative marine experiences. I was lucky enough to be there in 2013, 2014, before some of these major bleaching events occurred, and witnessing, that devastation was definitely a very strong driver for me to want to get into the marine space in general. And what I've kind of landed on after all this time is, as Anton was talking about, there's a lot of excitement about, innovation in seaweed and using seaweed as part of ecosystemic remediation and mitigation measures. And there's just a lot of exciting work that's being done out there, but it's all rather siloed. And the promise of it lies in it being orchestrated. So you've got the concept of cascading biorefineries, where we talked about in some of our classes, you can begin with high-value compounds like fucoidins or your ovens or things that can go into pharmaceuticals or your skincare products. And then afterwards, you can get your alginates and your hydrocolloids. And then at the end, you've got some residual biomass left. And this presents an opportunity to extract a lot of value and to enable different applications, but only when it's coordinated, when it's balanced, because it doesn't help if you've only got one part of the chain and the seaweed can't get to the next part. So the project that I've been working on aims to provide some data tools to kind of sketch out what these value chains can look at, what they can look like, and give you some data about the different parameters that result from the choices that you might make.
So it's a tool to support all the different actors of the value chain.
Yeah, it's a tool to help them coordinate and to get them to kind of give them fast sketches, kind of techno-economic analysis and life cycle assessments of integrated seaweed processing pathways. And I think that by offering this kind of framework to coordinate things at a higher level, then that could be a useful tool for these people that are out there working on specific cascading processing chains or specific exciting applications like bioplastics or even fabrics.
Just maybe a few words of context around that. So, William, you're a Blue Manager student, and this track at Mares University, it's a career transition. And you say that you really connected into the ocean with this Kuroshio experience. So, you're trying to develop this tool. Currently speaking, it's an intelligence tool for the different actors of the market.
Yeah, and I think for example, tying it to Japan. Japan is, it's well known for its seaweed with its nori and its use in culinary, just all sorts of different dishes. But it's not really a major power when it comes to growing large amounts of it. They basically just grow kind of enough for domestic consumption of their own gourmet seaweed. Oh, this is our, Japanese made seaweed. It's slightly more expensive than the Chinese stuff or the Korean stuff. But I think that presents an opportunity for cultivators and processors to use a tool like the one I'm trying to develop to see what opportunities they might be leaving on the table. Because they've already got all this infrastructure in place for the cultivation and for the processing, but the market for their edible seaweed could fluctuate from year to year, from season to season. And I'm trying to provide tools to help make sense of some of those changes, in addition to kind of illuminating the path forward for some of the more innovative applications.
Thank you, William. Maybe we can go back to you, Antoine, because some of you know Antoine Herves for the creator of Naya, but you're also a consultant, and you've been consultant on seaweed for years. You love seaweeds, or you used to love seaweeds at least. And so, what do you think about that? Coming back to that, Antoine. So, the connection between the different actors of the seaweed value chain.
So, since 2020, 2021, since the COVID era, there's been a lot of excitement around seaweed, especially in Europe and North America, because it's been seen not only as an economic opportunity, but also a potential solution against climate change. Although this can be a very, very interesting solution, once again, the ocean never works in a silo. There's not only one single marine ingredient that's going to solve everything. So it's an ecosystem approach. And the model we have, especially in Korea, Indonesia, and China, kind of underlines this. They've been doing intensive aquaculture around their coastlines for decades. And today they're realizing that it had a negative impact. So today there is a goal in saying, how can we have an ecosystem approach, and saying, how can we connect different aquaculture solutions together in order to build a more resilient coastline while also providing economic opportunity, environmental resilience, and social inclusion. Regarding the seaweed itself, I'm still a very passionate person about seaweed. I think there is a lot of potential, and as William underlined, there's plenty of valuable ingredients that we can find, and there's still plenty to discover down the line. But once again, there was a lot of excitement. People thought, seaweed businesses were like tech startups, but the reality is it's still an agricultural product. So you need to understand what you're going to do with it. You need to understand what the low-hanging fruits are, how you're going to expand, and then where the market is, because it's not just because a seaweed has a valuable ingredient that you're going to be able to sell it for thousands or millions of dollars. You need to understand if there's a need for this product on the market today. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand this, which is why there's certain complications for the seaweed industry today. But it doesn't underline the negative aspects. Today, there's a huge potential for this market. It's just how do we combine this with other aquaculture sectors in order to make it more resilient?
Thank you for your point of view, Antoine. We can come back to the whole panel. And so as we are going close to the end of this session, maybe coming back to Christelle as is first, if you want to share something to the audience, you can take your time, 1 minute, for example. We can start with you as is.
I would say about the region, the wider region, especially I can speak on behalf of the Taiwanese research, that the position of Taiwan is extremely important for coral reef connectivity to all the places that we've been speaking about, to China, to South Korea, to Okinawa and Japan, as well. It is really a stepping stone from more equatorial countries, like for example, like the Philippines, where larvae come up the Kuroshio and maybe stops off in Taiwan, and then we populate the rest. So Taiwan's position is extremely important, not just for our own corals, but for the rest of East Asia. The wider region is a powerhouse of many things. It is a very dynamic region. Things change much faster than they do in Europe. But I feel that many of the solutions we probably already have, and we probably need to be better at sharing, for sure. And people maybe need to be better at listening too. But it is a real kind of special region that is growing all the time and changing very fast. Yeah.
Estelle.
All right. Yeah, I guess just to finish, just kind of two simple things is that coral are really important and they're in big trouble. So under climate change, we're seeing huge declines in coral reef ecosystems globally, and we all know the ultimate cause of that, and it's us. So if we do want to see coral reefs in the future, if marine ecosystems want to benefit from the functionality they provide, and if we want to benefit from the ecosystem services they provide, we have to take really fast and dramatic action to mitigate climate change as best as we can if we want these ecosystems to function and be present in the future. I'll end on that.
Thank you, Christelle. William, Antoine, back on the seaweeds. Maybe Antoine?
For me, I think we need to really learn from Asia. Asia has a lot to learn, whether it's through coral restoration, mangrove restoration, seaweed aquaculture. They've been doing this for a very long time. The diversity of the climates as well, and the variety of social models makes it very interesting for us as Europeans or even in North America to really learn lessons on how we can build very intelligent coastal management plans. And for seaweed, yeah, I mean, for everyone who's up for seaweed, eat some. It's great, and I think there's a lot of potential. So please believe in it, and hopefully we'll see more of it in the next years.
We had a discussion about seaweeds in the session. Oh, it was a long time ago on the sustainable aquaculture. But still, we fly it outside. William, we will conclude with you.
Well, I guess kind of to go back to what Antoine was saying a little bit earlier. One thing that always sticks out to me whenever I'm reading about kind of big maritime issues is that the solutions or the path forward, at least, always seems to be ecosystemic in nature, where we have to, really take a broad view and take a very kind of distant systems level view of these issues to be able to actually address them, because otherwise it's almost like playing whack-a-mole. Like you try to address some sort of acute issue in one area and only to realize that you failed to take into account another part of the system. And that goes for everything from mangroves, some mangrove initiatives kind of falling a little flat because they overplanted and ended up with some of the kind of industrial monocultures that we criticize in other contexts, or unfortunately, an overpopulation of green turtles having a negative effect on seagrass meadows in a certain area. I believe it was in Taiwan, which is a consequence of overfishing of sharks, their natural predators. So just the kind of depth at which these things all kind of entangle into each other, I think, is something that we always need to be aware of.
Yeah, sometimes good ideas may turn to not be the perfect solution. Yeah, we need science. Yes. Thank you for all of you.
Yep. Thanks for being
you.
with us, because we are already at the end.
Thank
of the
you.
session. So it's been lovely to have you. Thank you, Crystal, from being from Taiwan, for viewers to
And also to have another crystal.
Yeah, I'm really honored to have another crystal in the
Great.
session. But yeah, no, and to viewers to stay awake with us at 2 a.m. Also, perhaps some people watching on YouTube, it seems. We will be still live for a couple of hours, and we are moving to the next session with the Philippines now. We're going back to the reef. Coral reefs are coming more and more.
Yes.
Yeah,
With our friend from Subai and from Blue Alliance.
yes. So stay tuned, and thanks again for being with us.
And Aziz, you have to come back here. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.